Hello everybody, welcome to Developing Through Change. We've got a special guest this week. We've got Tina Teague with us, and Tina, I'll come to you in a second. We also obviously have Mark and John, always here.
The problem one always present.
Yeah. Today we're going to focus our discussion around networks, those powerful, often kind of invisible structures that can kind of shape whether you get access to support, whether you get seen, whether you get heard. The real question we'll kind of face into is whether a network can be a helpful bridge. When it is a helpful bridge, how does that operate? Or when it's a barrier, how to break down the barriers so that all people can benefit from the power of networks. Before we get into that, I thought maybe, Tina, I'll come to you. A good chance to just get an introduction from yourself, but also tell us about where we are today. This venue, what you're doing here with your team is really exciting. I'd love other people to hear about it.
Thanks, Dan, and welcome to you both. Thank you for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to speak with you today. So today we are at the Waterloo Court, our Health and Wellbeing Hub. So this venue came about because, so I've got a background in healthcare. I spent a long time working in the NHS. And once I worked in the NHS, I found it quite frustrating in terms of development and opportunity and the kind of the pace in which things evolved. And I've always been passionate about the idea of holistic care. So this Health and Wellbeing Hub came about from that perspective of being able to provide holistic care. So the whole idea of this hub is to be able to offer people holistic care, which will involve a range of services accessible from a range of professionals, so that we treat individuals as an individual and not for just an individual condition that they might have. And we're also passionate about preventative and proactive care, so being able to support people before the problems arise. So whilst I worked in the NHS, I found it frustrating that I was limited in terms of the power and influence I had to be able to develop some of those services. So it's been great to have the opportunity to whilst it's outside of the traditional NHS, being able to develop something that offers people the opportunity to.
I think it's lovely, isn't it, for you, because you're sort of circumventing the politics. You're saying, well, let's put the person right in the middle, and we don't have to ask permission to do what's right for that person. And that's a real game changer for you, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's what a lovely place to be.
Yeah, and just the quality of the build and the finish. And then we've looked out the back at the wellbeing hub areas that people will hire. What sort of professionals or people are you renting the space to?
Yeah, so we're going to have clinicians in the sense of traditional general practice services, so looking after long-term conditions and some of that proactive health and well-being checks. So we're going to have clinical services, and then we're going to have some of those complementing services like physiotherapy, counseling, psychological therapies. We're going to have a Pilates studio in the back. We're going to have some intense physio. We've got nutrition services, so a whole range of services that enable people to take that much more holistic approach. We're quite excited. We've started doing things like workshops as well, so it's not just going to be appointments. We're going to do workshops, and those workshops expand from doing like we're doing today. We're going to do some work around leadership development and personal development, but we're also going to do some of that support around community well-being.
Brilliant. And physical location, we're literally 200 yards from junction 27 on the M5, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
So easy to find, unless you do what I did this morning, miss a junction. I mean, but hey, it's a lovely location, and certainly when you come in, it's a very impressive looking building, isn't it? I think you've done incredible to sort of make it feel so calm. One thing, I've walked in and I just felt calm instantly. I just wanted to sit down, have a coffee, and go, okay, what am I thinking about now? So what a great space to come into if you do need assistance. You need someone to really look at you holistically and say, let's look at you wholly. What do you need? And it might be you need A, B, C, and D, but actually, have you thought about this?
Yeah. And sorry, I was going to say I'd like to take all of the credit for it, but thanks to
Take it.
some of myself. I'm in a partnership with two others, Tim and James, and their experience within kind of logistics and working within healthcare services and being involved in setting up healthcare services has been instrumental in making this place a success.
But you've had a shared vision, and that's what's made this work, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the three of us complement each other because we've got individual skill set that we bring together to enable this to happen.
I like what you've done. We know that the NHS is sometimes in trying to change it and transform it is incredibly difficult, and so there are certain things they're trying to achieve. You know, this more person-centred, more holistic, looking at different models of care. But of course, the system itself often becomes the inhibitor against that, and you stepping outside that, you two can achieve some of the objectives and understanding and reimagining what health and care could look like, a new model of care using a different approach. You have the freedom and flexibility to innovate, which should be applauded. Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's brave. It's incredibly brave to go, I'm tired of the nonsense, I'm just going to do it myself. All credit to you.
Yeah. And it's, you know, born out of that relentless effort I've seen you putting in trying to help the system, and now you've questioned what's the best way to do that. So well done.
Yeah. Before we just finish off on that, I just want to point out as well that I remain committed to, you know, what I can do to be able to influence that work within the NHS, and if I need to do that from externally, then, you know, I want to be able to do that. But I think we've got a fantastic healthcare service, and we should be doing what we can to help innovate it.
I always think personally the best way to influence is by showing that it can be different, isn't it? And that's really what you're leading here, isn't it? This incredible sort of slight change in direction, really.
Okay, so we'll move into a little bit of the discussion about networks. In a moment, Tina, I'll ask you maybe what has your own experience taught you about how networks kind of open doors, but it's not without a little bit of trepidation that we have this discussion, because we're deliberately trying to consider how existing power structures maintain a status quo. So, Mark, I know you're holding a few concerns maybe about how we go about this. Do you want to just share any of your concerns?
Well, I mean, and apart from, you know, us being three, you know, white middle class blokes, sitting within a kind of sort of cultural sort of paradigm, I'm always aware that we can sort of have a view of this, but it can be from privilege and have one view. I also just think that, you know, talking about people being excluded, people being privileged, especially in a world which is, you know, going through a lot of sort of change and a lot of upset at the moment, and then loads of examples which people will be very sensitive about, and I know that I won't get it right. I know that I'm imperfect and I have a particular view and I might say the wrong thing. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't be courageous enough to have these discussions, but I'm aware that it's all about context, and things can be said and be taken out of context, and even if you think we got the context, there's a greater context. So I'm just a little bit sort of aware of my own shortcomings and my own position in relation to a subject which, you know, can bring a range of things about who's excluded, who's in and who's out.
Yeah, I feel similarly. I think though the task, when I look at all of the privilege I seem to have benefited from, is then if I can learn enough about that, think about the bias that I must have and that exists and perpetuates some benefits for me, then there must be ways to open that up and to benefit others in a non-patronising and enabling way. So that's kind of what I hope to develop a little bit through this conversation. John, anything you want to say before we get started?
The drills are back. So just want to highlight that. Every time I have a podcast, somebody starts drilling. So it is what it is.
We've got our own builders, we bring them along. There was a point where we decided that no builders actually do any work and stand around all day, and as a result they follow us around and they do work when we're doing something.
Absolutely. But going back to the privilege thing, I think to be humble is also something to be a part of that. So you might be privileged in being, what you're saying, white males in the UK, but actually we do not know it all. You know, we don't come with this massive ego, do we, that puts us on this pedestal. And I think that's the thing to get across here. And we're always open to sort of say, firstly, I don't know, or secondly, can you help me? And thirdly, where do I sit in this room around sort of my peers and my colleagues, and what does that mean? Because actually, it doesn't matter how privileged you are, sometimes you sit in a room and that sort of little person on shoulders saying, oh, I shouldn't be here. You know, and we all have had that. It doesn't matter how privileged you may be, you still feel like that inside sometimes. So I think there's something to sort of acknowledge there, isn't it? That you may have been born into wealth, you may not have been, you may have been put in this pedestal because you worked hard, but actually there's still sometimes in your own soul, you're not worthy. And I just think that's meant to hold on to as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, let's dive in. Tina, are you happy to share anything from your own experience, like what you've learned about how networks open or close doors, or keep them closed maybe?
So I mean, some of what I'm going to say is contradictory actually, but I was very fortunate because I moved to this country 25 years ago, so being foreign, and being perhaps invisible because the cultural shift for me, coming into a foreign country, not really knowing anyone and trying to adapt, and trying to just kind of work my way through without any of those introductions made for me. So I had the opportunity because someone took a chance on me. My first job that I applied for, someone who'd never met me before, had no idea about me, no one put in a good word for me, there was no kind of pre-connection, genuinely looked at my job application and gave me a chance and gave me my first job. And the lady who did that, she not only became instrumental in terms of my professional career, she also became instrumental in terms of my personal life, because she opened a door for me, she gave me an opportunity, and that completely changed, my life for me. And I would attribute where I am today to her and the opportunities that she gave me. So, that is kind of an example of where not having any networks, not knowing people, not having those doors open, and perhaps being visible for the wrong reasons, because I'm, visibly different, I've got an accent, I'm foreign, so I had all those things, which sometimes work against you, sometimes they work to your advantage, but someone took a chance on me. I'm eternally grateful to them, and they've continued to be instrumental in my life to this day, and in fact I spent the weekend with her. So that was my story, and that for me, I think that I would say that influenced a lot of who I am and where I am today. And I would then kind of flip that around and say networks have been beneficial for me because I'm curious, and I think I'm curious partly because having come to a foreign country, I was kind of determined to fit in and determined to learn more and adapt to this new culture that I was in. So I was curious and made lots of friends, lots of connections, got to know lots of people, and took every opportunity to be able to connect with people, whether they were socially, professionally, and otherwise. So in that sense, I started to form networks, and those networks have continued over the years for me. So, I started from having no networks and been given a chance by someone to having created my own networks. But I try my best to use those networks for the benefits for others in the same way that I was supported. I want to be able to do the same for others. I did some work with the Social Mobility Foundation, which is a charity that supports young people who are aspiring to go to university or in early stages of their career to think about what opportunities there might be for them, and that they often don't have networks. So it's just thinking about how I can use my experience and learning to be able to support them. So I've benefited from those networks.
I think it's really interesting though, because one of the things that I really want to home in on that was, there's one moment, wasn't there, where this person gave you a chance. That's a real pivotal moment in your life, and I think we all can have that. If we think back, there'll be 1, 2, or 3 people where they've set us off on a different trajectory, and it's completely changed who you are, how you perceive things, and what you want to achieve. And it's really funny that those people probably don't even realise they've had such a profound impact on you. And even when you tell them, they sort of say, well, that really wasn't that big a thing, John. I mean, I had one, and it was a phone call actually. I kept on phoning in sick. My manager at the time, as an estate agent, phone up and went, John, you better be dying or dead. You better get in here. When I got in, he literally just basically went, come on, let's just get on with the day job. But that bit of kindness and that fundamental smack on the derriere moved me forward, and then he just kept on, and it changed who I was.
And so he was forcing you to come into work when you were ill? Just checking
well,
that sort of
wasn't ill.
moment of
I
kindness.
just couldn't bother to get up.
I
I just couldn't be bothered. But actually, he was the first person who cared enough to be blunt and say, I don't want you to leave, but I am going to push you in the right direction.
Yeah.
And those little things change who you are sometimes.
Yeah. Have you had any similar experiences, Mark? Maybe a leader that you respect who just gave you a piece of feedback or something?
Well, you, Dan.
Not me.
Well, I think that the issue is that some of us have a high opinion of ourselves, many of us don't. Many of us want to hide our vulnerabilities or hide what we perceive as our flaws. And it might be some cultural thing, it might be a different ability or disability, it might be a background, because people make assumptions very, very quickly, and it's natural to do that in a fast-paced world, and we don't want to be pigeonholed, or we don't want to be frozen out. The issue is having someone who invites you in and says, I see you, I accept you, and I won't judge you at this stage. And having someone who has that ability to allow you to reveal your true self instead of masking, I think is incredibly important, because you will only be at your best with your authentic self. And I think that's why it's incredibly important to have those people.
Yeah. I think you're spot on, Mark. And I feel about this lady, Madeline, she won't mind me mentioning her, exactly that. She took me for who I was and allowed me to be my authentic self. And, just like you said, John, I think 25 years later, even when I talk to her, to her, it wasn't a big deal, but for me, it's been absolutely instrumental.
Well, she reinforced your self-worth at that moment, didn't she? She said, I don't know you, but on face value, you are worth putting some trust in and putting some energy into. And that just sort of inflated you to let you go in there and let you sort of turn into who you are.
Yeah.
So one of the things we were hoping that might come out of this discussion, I think already has, which is like practical things that people can do. And so I liked the way in which that discussion went, was like, so who helped you into the room? Okay, we've understood that. So now the question, you have to turn it back on yourself, and who might you help into the room? So that's a good one for the audience. But I like the social mobility work that you're doing. So that's a conscious effort by you to help other people in. What challenges is there within that work?
So it's back to the thing about networks is so often your own networks can be restricted, can't they? Because you often make networks based on geography, where you went to school, or the profession that you're working in. So that's kind of restrictive, isn't it? In the sense that we're reinforcing, who we are and the environment that we're in. So what that does is, when you have students from the Social Mobility Foundation, they're coming from all sorts of geographical areas and all sorts of backgrounds. So it's often frustrating because you don't feel like you understand or you know enough about where they might be or where they're coming from to be able to support them through those networks. So that is a challenge. And I think what can often happen is, if you think about kind of networks, they're fueling, perhaps we talk about privilege, they perhaps fuel in privilege and they fuel in those echo chambers. So it requires a conscious effort by all of us to step back from those networks and think, how can I broaden this network, let more people in? How am I consciously making myself uncomfortable by inviting people into it that I wouldn't otherwise invite, that, you know, will help me as well as maybe help them? So, you know, it's
I think it's quite, I think you're absolutely right, because actually looking for the people that say no are sometimes more powerful than the people that say yes, aren't they? But it takes a certain character to be challenged and then bring that into your network, doesn't it? And so actually, I want to be vulnerable enough to say, I may not be right, challenge me, and how do we grow together? And that's quite a difficult place to be if you're the person who's always had yes said to you.
Yeah.
I think it's difficult because I think that it goes against sort of human evolution to a certain extent. We're talking about networks, so thinking about sort of this idea of tribalism.
Yeah.
And there's many good aspects of tribalism in terms of survival of the individual. You know, the tribe gives you community, it gives you a sense of belonging. It can support and help you sort of nurture personal growth. It sort of combats loneliness. It can create collective action and purpose, and gives you a sense of that, and that's really good. However, you know, that's something which, you know, in prehistory up to the present day. But I think that the bad side of that is that it can create an us and them.
Yes.
It can create a sort of a
Collective bias, isn't it?
a collective bias where you sit within your own echo chamber and sound chamber, and creates a self-righteousness. It creates I'm, us and them, which creates a more place of potential conflict and room for conflict rather than collaboration. It creates a nepotistic kind of sort of approach where you favour the people within your network.
Yes.
You exclude those people from the network who might challenge those kinds of views. And so I think that there is a lot of issue. The issue with it is how do you create strength and diversity?
Yeah.
How do you create a more sort of holistic view which gives you better decision making and all those things at the same time? Preserve that sense of community, and that's a really difficult one, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't think you can overcome tribalism. No. I think personally, I think it's sort of part of human nature. But I think what we need to say is that we recognise the good parts of it. We understand how it manifests in a bad way, and we are aware of that. And then you're saying, and certainly with the leader you talked about, is that if I'm aware of it, then I can mitigate or moderate that.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to when we did the introductions and you talked about privilege. I think for me, there's kind of 3 key points. It's been about being open-minded and being willing to listen, learn and adapt. And then what you do about that afterwards in terms of that continuously adapting and changing, because I absolutely agree that, you know, it is natural and it's a survival mechanism, tribalism, isn't it? But it's just thinking, you know, if networks are closed loops, there's a risk that we're just recycling the past, you know, if we don't.
I definitely think the best networks are people that have the outliers. I mean, for me, if you look at a network, you almost want it like a big roundabout, don't you? With the hub in the middle and all the strands coming off, and have that ability to go, right, we're going to look over here now, we're going to look over there now. And I think there's something really powerful about having that right team, because you need every element. You need somebody that's going to say, hang on a minute, I'm really worried about the governance. And it's the most boring thing in the world, but I want to bring you back to the governance. You say, well, hang on a minute, I want to look at the innovation, you know, and somewhere in the middle you have to come together. And if you just only have one of those things, you can't achieve anything.
I think that tribalism, or the network in that sense, is increasingly problematic at this day and age. I think that for whatever it is, that there are increased power disparities between the powerful and the people who are not in power, increased inequalities, and there is abundance has concentrated in the few, where there is a lack of abundance of a whole bunch of things. I don't mean abundance in terms of just material things, but simply belonging and loneliness and various other things. And I think that what happens when tribalism came about as an act of clubbing together to survive, to create to access resources. If they become scarce, then we become potentially more tribal, more protective, and we see this around the world with the rise of nationalism and various other things. And protectionism, and for me, then you start in that very destructive loop of, and it becomes really hard in this kind of stakeholder economy where everyone's a stakeholder, and what they're doing is they don't want to change, they have their truth, and what they want to do is they want to make sure, so you can even see this in the NHS and various other things, is that this is the paradigm, this is what I believe in, I want more pay for this, to do exactly the thing and I want to just make the case more and more strongly. We create greater conflict in lack of abundance. So the question is that how do we create abundance or make that more available?
A mindset of abundance.
Yes, that's right.
It's tricky. I mean, if we're talking about modern age, tribalism is quite a sort of old sort of framed word. But I think if you move that to today, it is silo, isn't it? It's a silo working.
Yeah.
I mean, if you just move it from that to the siloed working that we all find ourselves in, that's where we have the biggest risk, isn't it? Because we're completely in our bubble.
Yes.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how much you try to move it left and move it right, somebody in that bubble will say, well, hang on a minute, the budget doesn't dictate that.
Yes.
I won't allow that. And actually, nothing ever gets fixed.
It's interesting, just I'll frame it through my own experience, because the silo can be the organisation.
Absolutely.
And they can be like an in-group. So I've spent a year now being self-employed, and I have to remind myself, I can choose. I can choose who I work with, or I could choose which team I might put together around this opportunity. Whereas when you're in an organisation, even though you possibly could choose, for some reason, because of how we do stuff around here, that sort of habit of the past means you don't really question it. And I think that's what's come out from this discussion as another practical tool is, if we can question the purpose of what we're doing and whether what got us to the point we are now will get us to the point that we want to get to, then we can possibly open the door to going, well, I need some other voices, I need some other experience, I need some other inputs. So the ability to pause, question, look around and say, are these inputs, the resources, expertise sufficient?
Yeah.
And they probably aren't, because the problems we've got today aren't really going away by just working harder.
Yeah.
It's a great book, isn't there? Is it called Think Again or something? I don't know. I'm going to have to find it now. It's a great book about Think Again. It literally is exactly that, about rethinking all your decisions as you do them. So when you make a decision about who you're going to hire, before you make a decision, have 2 seconds to rethink that.
Yeah.
And you might come up with the same outcome, but actually you might not. And it's quite a challenging thing to do, because when you've made a decision on something, quite often you go, I've done it, I'm right, I'm going to do that. But if you challenge that to yourself and rethink it, you may find a slightly better way forward.
Yeah, I think if you're a leader or anyone in an organisation trying to develop a culture of what I could call intellectual humility, is that, how many times you've been in a meeting where someone says, there's the expert says, I know what the problems are, I know what the solutions are, well, why haven't they been? And I think for me is that we sit in that bubble of rightness. Sometimes we need a degree of self-belief to actually move forward every day and get up in the mornings, but we've got to have that intellectual humility and say, actually, I'm not always right, I'm not right, I just want to question that. And it's okay to do that and be humble in being able to voice that lack of certainty.
Yeah.
So I found the book, just going to put it out there. It's called Think Again by Adam Grant.
Brilliant.
It's well worth looking at. It just gives you a slightly different perspective on what would help. Just a drop.
Great, thank you. Tina, I wanted to kind of go a bit deeper, I suppose, which is, I would imagine that not just like occasionally, but maybe daily, there's barriers that you might see present and witness that maybe I don't see at all. And that's possibly going to speak to more of the problematic aspects of networks and things. So is there any lived experience where you can kind of bring into this discussion to help us empathise better with what people might face as barriers?
Sure. This goes goes kind of beyond networks. So I gave you my own personal experience, and I've got 2 boys. At the minute, I've got twins who are just in the final year of university, and they are looking for jobs at the minute, and they're getting all the pushback of you need to have experience, or you know, this kind of cycle of you need to have experience. Well, you know, give me the opportunity to get the experience and so on. And people have said, oh, you know, use your networks, use your mum's networks or your dad's networks, and use your networks. And I found myself sitting back and thinking, for the courses that they've studied, I don't have the right networks, which has left me immensely frustrated, you know, for 2 reasons. The first reason, as a parent, you want the best for your children, and you want to make things, you want to pave the way for their future as best as you can. And I find myself thinking, I'm not able to support them with this because I don't have the right networks. And then I get equally frustrated thinking, well, it shouldn't have to be that way. People should take a chance on them, like I had someone take a chance on me and give them the opportunity. And I want to believe that if they keep trying, at some point, someone will give them an opportunity and give them the chance. But that is seated in a whole complex range of issues, which is, obviously from my accent you can tell I'm foreign, so I'm foreign, I'm mixed race. I'm living in a part of the country that's not as diverse as it could be. I've done everything I can to integrate, but I consciously feel on a daily basis, and that may be a conscious that sits in myself. It's not that other people are making me feel like that. That's a consciousness that sits in myself, that I am on a daily basis trying to prove myself in order for me to fit in and to accept, because of the cultural differences and everything else that comes with that. So it is a challenge. And in terms of those kind of networks, I find myself, even when I'm integrating within those networks, thinking, how do I adapt in order to make sure that I am fitting within those networks? So it is a very complex issue, and I'm not, you know, don't get me wrong, I'm not kind of pointing fingers at anyone or externalizing this. It is a complication, because the other complication I have, which I'm aware of, is I grew up in Zimbabwe, and you know, my dad's from South Africa, so we had apartheid South Africa. So I'm aware myself of the whole complexity around the issues that I individually carry, and how that may play through my own life. So it's just consciously, I would challenge the listeners to think, you know, what can they do? How can they consciously support and, you know, make, do what they can to make things different for people that, and they may not be aware of it, because most of the people I come across and most of the people I've met in the 25 years I've lived have been fantastic. They were, you know, I've always felt, you know, welcomed and supported, but it's just thinking, well, what else can I be doing? What else can I be doing to support that? And don't shy away from it. Don't feel uncomfortable. You know, do ask the questions, and, you know, do what you can to support.
I think there's something very powerful about leading, isn't there? But leading by bringing people with you, empowering them, and by them doing well, you do well, rather than just sitting at the top and waiting for people to feed you. I think there's something much more powerful about doing what you're saying and actually bringing people with you and enhancing what they can do. And I think there's, you know, funny enough, my wife said to me the other week, John, I don't know who you're trying to impress. And I was like, thanks, wife. But the reality is, when I thought about that, for me, I was trying to impress myself, because sometimes you beat yourself up so much. And you've been told lots of things about you personally, especially when you're younger, you know, you may do this, you may not do that. But I think if you're a person who's driven, sometimes it's about you, isn't it?
Yeah.
And pushing yourself. And it's actually, I'm not trying to impress you, I don't mind what you think of me, I'm trying to impress myself. And sometimes it's a really hard battle inside yourself to get past that, isn't it? Because actually you raise it up higher than what anybody else will. And it's tricky.
You've always left a great impression on me.
Yeah. I think if you just come to the Venn Health, they do counselling for that.
Right, indeed. I just pick up on your story, and if I can reflect back and tell me if I've got this wrong, is that it feels like you've had to work that much harder to prove yourself, to be acceptable, to be, and I could sit here, and I've heard people in my position before going, I've had to work hard for everything in my life. Actually, you've had it easy because of your privilege, because people accept what you look like and how you sound and whatever. It's easy. You might think you work for it, but you've actually had to work harder. And I think for me is that it's recognising one's own privilege, but also recognising where someone's actually having to work harder to make the same headway and make it easier for them because it's harder. And I think for me as a leader, we need to recognise that.
Cool. Well, I'm going to stay with that because is it making it easier? Because is that the right frame?
I don't know if that's the right word.
Might be, might not be. But so if you take your sons, I've met one of them. What I would perceive is it's not about making it easier. It's about going, because of the challenge this person has had, if they are developing their increased awareness of the situation of themselves and they're pushing and they're striving, those are characteristics that I need in the stuff that I'm doing. So how could I potentially work with that individual? Because, not to make it easier for them, but because they've demonstrated character, and that character is an asset to the project. So that was where my thought goes. But what's your reflection on it, Tim?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? It kind of also, it makes me think about, we talk about equality and we talk about a whole range of things around that, and it kind of, what is equality and that sort of thing. But I think what tends to happen for all of us, I do it when I go back to Africa, is we see the world from our lenses, don't we? And we treat people in a way that we think they experience in what we're experiencing. So it's about just kind of taking a step back and going, what do I need to adapt in order to make the adjustments for this individual without I don't want it to sound like I'm asking or describing something that needs to alter immensely. It's just perhaps taking, we do it when we go to France, Italy, whatever, it's like, how do I need to get my point across in a way that accommodates, the perspective that, this culture might be seeing it or experiencing it. And it's, I think there's minor things around that. But, if we take it back to the network thing, it's this thing about think about yourself and your own journey, and thinking about when have you had an experience where you felt not, we say about it's not what you know, it's who you know. What if you don't know anyone? What if you're not in the right room when the introductions will be made? What if you don't even know there's a room in which the introductions are being made?
There's lots of rooms you don't know about, isn't there? I just wanted to ask one question there, and I was reflecting about what you were saying there, and I was reflecting about my sons, and I was thinking about me and the generational difference. Because I put a lot of emphasis on my children about what I've gone through, but their lifestyle's been very different. So when you were talking then about your background, your children's life has been very different to yours. If you said to your children, how do you feel about not being able to get into my networks? Do you think they'd be bothered, or do you think they'd want that, or do you think they want to find their own way? And it's a really difficult one as a parent, because we want the best. We want to go, we can help. They may not want that. It's a hard one, isn't it? Yeah,
I think you're so spot on, John, because my sons tell me all the time, we're not you, Mum. We're not you. We're not experiencing what you experienced, because, my sons were born here, so they know no different. And they have pushed back at me and said, we want to find our way ourselves. But we've gone full circle in this, because whilst one of my sons written countless applications for opportunities blindly, seeing something he's interested in and quite likes the sound of, and he's writing. And people will say to him repeatedly, do you not know anyone there, or did you not make a phone call, or did you not connect with the right people? So that's reinforcing this point about the networking, because what he's trying to find his own way. And I'm just kind of reflecting on the only experience I've had in terms of what I'm seeing with the networks. But we all do it all the time. Do you know anybody who could? Whether it's we're looking for
if there's an opportunity
tradesmen,
for somebody to step up, that's the thing, isn't it? But one thing that you've proven, and your sons will be gravitating to probably, is persistency and consistency has got you to where you are, because you've refused to give up. And I think that's what they hopefully will learn from you, that even if it has lots of knockbacks, if you keep turning up and you keep doing, you keep reimagining what you can be, you will find that network, won't you?
I'm just sort of reflecting on the easy a little bit, but actually what we want to do is recognise what are the barriers to people to achieve their full potential. Going back to sort of networks and relationships, and the thing is though that if you know someone and you trust them, if they say this person's will be good, it lowers the risk of hiring someone who maybe is not for the job or doesn't perform whatever, and you trust their opinion. And so naturally in sort of selection, you might relationships and networks, sourcing good people from through recommendations of people you trust is a natural way of making sure that you don't make mistakes. And so I think that is natural, and I don't think one should get rid of that. But also I think one needs to be aware that you might not get the best candidate or the best person, so you need to be able to be open as well to new input and new things. And that balanced approach will allow you to have that diversity and new thing, but also a kind of surety about of what you do want and that relationship.
You do have to search for middle ground, don't you, between trust and ability? Because no trust and high ability is a nightmare.
So let's start to bring it into practical steps, because we've had a few. Tell me, Tina, whether I'm understanding this well enough, which is that opening a door for somebody can be life-changing, and it can often be low cost for the individual. But as you were just saying, Mark, I think doing that with a deeper understanding of that person, their context, their barriers that they've faced, will also enable you to be more specific, more helpful. The introductions you might make might be more richer connections. So it's taking the time to meet the person where they are, listen to their story and what they're wanting, think about the challenges, your world, your expertise, and then make connections around that. It's not just, do you want this, do you want this? And if it's not right for the person, assuming that, it was their mistake, we've got to go a bit deeper. Is that a kind of a process that you advocate or that you think is right?
I would go further with kind of two things. There's something around, at the moment, all of us collectively, we're mentoring and supporting people to fit into broken systems. We're trying to help people to adjust into broken systems. And what we should be doing is challenging those systems and looking at how we change the systems in order for the systems to accept that diversity and the things that you both talked about, Mark and John, how do we get those, the kind of the talent, the relationships, everything into the right systems. And then there's something for me about, maybe network flipping, which is thinking about us as individuals. So not just how can I help an individual, how can that individual help me? What am I missing in terms of, how is the network benefiting me rather than, you know, I'm part of a network and who can I help within this network. I think you talked about that earlier, Mark, with, you know, how do you, because you have different people within networks, you have the kind of people giving, people learning, and all those different roles. But if you flipped that around and if you took a chance on someone or you gave someone the opportunity, how do you individually benefit from that? And how does that make you much more open-minded, you know, integrated, diverse, and all of those?
I think you have to have some self-preservation around this as well, don't you, with networks? Because you do, like you were saying then, to break a mould and to challenge, you have to be very resilient, because you will get knocked down repeatedly, and you have to stand up and say it again, and then knock you down again. And that's really hard on your soul. Sometimes you walk away and you just think, oh, why bother? But there's always a bigger picture, isn't there? And that resilience you have to think about. Are you going to be able to cope with this, to keep on being knocked back down if you're going to challenge it? Because you will. You'll be knocked back a million times. But if you can keep turning up and consistency, you can make little detours and you can change the direction of something if you work hard enough to do it. And it's the right thing to do, of course.
That's great. So we've added another lens there, which is there's the individual and what the individual can do. But there's those in positions of power who should be questioning. I quite like the question actually. What got us here won't get us to where we're trying to get? What new ingredients, what new intelligence, new experience do we need? And then you question and you go, where can I find that? And am I going to find it from the existing relationships I have? Probably not, because those existing relationships were part of the thing that maybe got me here. But if my ambition is high, how do I reach out and find a more diverse set of experience and backgrounds? Possibly that isn't going to be through my own networks. Now I need to be speaking to others and being open. So you've got more of a systematic lens to it. Are there any other aspects that you feel that we should talk about before we start to bring it to a close?
Yeah, I think there's something around what talent are we overlooking, because that talent isn't connected to the right people. So, you know, what are we overlooking? You know, what is the talent out there that we're missing out on? And being bold enough to reach out and look for some of that talent, I think is really valuable. And I think there's a risk that networks, so asking ourselves individually and listeners, challenging themselves around, are the networks we're creating and the networks we're in, are they fortresses that are just, stopping evolution because they've become a fortress, so we're not evolving? And how do we ensure that evolution takes place, being bold and being willing to become uncomfortable, because we might have some of those rebel ideas, diversity challenges, you know, what are those things that we might bring into it?
I think there's something about a network as well, isn't there, around understanding what's driving a network. Yeah. What are you trying to achieve with this network? Because you never know what you're going to need if you're not looking to try and achieve something. Yeah. And it's very easy to be in a network that's just there, and then you're able to chat every now and then, but there's no actual direction. So it's something really powerful about it. If you've got a real good network, try and come to some conclusion about what is the network for.
Yeah. Purpose first, and then purpose with ambition, and then question whether you've got the right voices, the right experience in there, and then go searching. Yeah.
I think picking up on about those fortresses, it's really difficult if you're in a leadership position or inviting people in, because one thing is, you talked about broken systems, and often people have to become broken to fit in to the system. Yeah. And actually, it's not going to mend itself, is it? No. It's not going to mend the individuals inside it either. And you mask and you whatever, but you can't present your authentic face if you feel that it's not going to fit into the system. The system will just it's got an immune response to you. So it's deeply problematic for the leader to bring forward an authentic connection with someone, because what the person will be presenting is something which is deeply uncomfortable. And having to be able to hold that space, protect that space, in order for that person to impact positively and contribute positively to the change within that network, and the role of protecting, sponsoring, nurturing that person, especially in the early days, is incredibly important.
Do you think there's something quite powerful though about almost reflecting back to them that you understand? So if you're going to see a leader who you know has that sort of anti-back on you, spraying you away, and before you start, you're sort of saying to them, look, I understand your hands are tied. I understand your budget problems. I understand you're caught in this trap. But what we both know is we have to try and change this. How about looking at these ideas and play it along that way rather than just going and going, I know how to fix it.
I think going in and saying, telling everyone what you're doing wrong in a paradigm is probably not the best approach. I think one of the things is obviously you need to recognise the positives and the strengths within that network and what's done really well, and you just want to help them do it better. Is a way of approaching that, I expect.
Whichever way you look at it, though, it involves a deep set of resilient resources within people to keep on going. And so maybe as we close, just we often kind of come to this. It's kind of like you need to be able to look after yourself. So Tina, I know you do some things that keep your mind clear. What are some of the things that help you to relax and kind of stay rejuvenated and give you energy?
I don't relax. No, I do. There's loads of things I do. It gives me great satisfaction, selfishly, to do what I can to support others. A lot of my networks are about how do I give to others if I can, and I have the opportunity to do that. So I find that quite rewarding. I love the work that we do here. That gives me satisfaction because I love solving problems, and if we can do that through the work that we do here at the Hub, that makes me feel good as well. And I do a range of other charitable things. I'm kind of still connected to some projects in Africa, and that makes me feel so from a selfish perspective, those are all the things that kind of help me to stay focused and resilient. And I'm continuously learning from these conversations, meeting new people, and seeing what I can do with that.
Brilliant. Right, we're ready to close, I think.
Any last thoughts then? What's the last thoughts? So love that. I love that you've got your little things, little projects that keep you sane. Any last thoughts, Mark?
It just prompts me to reflect upon that self-care and nourishment and
like wine.
That's self-medication. I'm going on a walkabout next week, connecting with nature, just disappearing off into the undergrowth for a week. That will nourish me and make me feel stronger. But it just we need to do what we need to do to fill that well in order to provide.
Yeah.
I think so. You have to find a vent, a way to sort of self-cleanse and have a time to think. If you're trapped in a box and you have no time to reflect or even look out the window, you're just going to end up in a bit of a pickle, really. So thank you for sharing that. That was great. Go on, Dan, finish up.
Well, my main reflection is if you've got significant ambition, you want to change something, like you're doing here with this venue, and then you've got to really question whether the things that have helped you in the past will be sufficient, because that ambition is going to knock up against the status quo. So you need ingredients, you need resources to help you. Some of that is like you might need some money, etc. But a lot of it will be about knowledge. And the knowledge will need to come from diverse sources, given that the challenge that you're trying to deal with is significant. So seek to question early on, like that book says, whether you're talking to the right people, whether you're inviting the right people in, and then realize, if we go back to where we started, that just by inviting somebody in, you could be changing their life. It will help you, could be changing their life, isn't going to cost much. So
they at some point may reflect that back to you. So doing it selflessly may come back to you in 10 years' time. You don't know that, do you? And I think there's something really about being selfless in in networks, isn't there, and saying, actually, I can give a little bit as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, on that note.
Thank you for that.